The Oak Island Enigma is a collection of legends concerning lost treasures and mysterious artifacts that are said to have been discovered on or near Oak Island in Nova Scotia. Since the 18th century, people have been looking for riches and antiques and making attempts to find them. But where are they actually? And what do scientists reveal about it? Let's try to find it out in the next few minutes. Pirate treasures, Shakespearean manuscripts, the Holy Grail, and the Ark of the Covenant are all examples of the kinds of artifacts that have been postulated to reside on the island. According to one popular theory, the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant were both buried on the island by the Knights Templar. Over the years, numerous artifacts that were initially discovered on the island have made their way to the surface. Some of these artifacts have now been carbon dated and determined to be hundreds of years old. Although each of these objects could be deemed treasure in its own right, there has never been any significant discovery of the main treasure site. There have been excavations at the site carried out by a large number of different people and organizations. The first shaft, which was dug by early explorers and was referred to as the Money Pit, was located in an area that is unknown to us today. It is stated that the curse on the island dates back more than a century and states that 7 men will perish in the search for the gold before it is discovered. Since there is very little material that has been validated about the early treasure-related activities that took place on Oak Island, the following descriptions are stories that have been passed down through oral tradition and date back to the late 18th century. Publishers didn't start paying attention to this kind of action and investigating the stories involved until many decades after it had already occurred. The story of a treasure discovered by a settler named Daniel McGinnis first appeared in print in the year 1857. This is the first known version of the tale. After that, it took an additional 5 years until one of the claimed original diggers provided a statement regarding the initial narrative, as well as future Onslow and Truro Company actions. The first inhabitants of the area told a story about a dying sailor who was part of Captain Kidd's crew. The sailor said that Captain Kidd had buried treasure on the island that was worth £2 million. Captain Kidd died in 1701. Daniel McGinnis, who was hunting for a site for a farm in the area about 1799, when he discovered a dip in the earth. It is the protagonist of the version of the discovery's events that is most frequently accepted. McGinnis sought assistance with digging because he thought the depression fit the narrative about Captain Kidd, and other people agreed with him. He excavated the pit with the help of 2 men who were only identified as John Smith and Anthony Vaughan. 2 feet below the surface, he found a layer of flagstones. However, the oldest records only describe marks of some kind at these intervals. Later accounts state that oak platforms were found at every 10-foot interval, but the earlier accounts just mentioned marks. The tool marks or pick scrapes on the walls of the hole were also mentioned in the different stories. The ground was obviously loose, and compared to the surrounding soil, it was not as hard-packed. The 3 men are said to have given up on the dig when they had reached a depth of 30 feet, owing to superstitious dread. Another interesting take on the plot has the 4 main characters all taking place as young adults. In this interpretation, McGinnis discovers the depression for the first time in 1795 as he is out on a fishing trip. The remainder of the story follows the same pattern as the first, which involves the discovered logs, but it culminates with the 4 people quitting after they have dug as far as they are able to. In 1861, a firm known as the Oak Island Association attempted to carry out the next significant excavation. In addition to digging 2 additional shafts, the previous pit was re-excavated all the way down to a depth of 88 feet. The first one failed to hit its intended objective of a purported flood tunnel, while the other one intersected the original shaft through a branching off tunnel at a depth of around 105 feet. When there was a second breach in what was thought to be a flood tunnel, both of these shafts were flooded with water. At one point in time, one of the platforms that had been installed in the initial shaft at 98 feet fell to a lower level after collapsing. The effect caused the subsequent 2 platforms to fall as well, and any treasure is now believed to be located some 119 feet below ground, along with approximately 10,000 board feet of lumber. When a pump engine boiler ruptured in the fall of 1861, It was the first of 6 unfortunate deaths that occurred accidentally during the excavations. The explosion was first described in a novel published in 1863 titled Rambles Among the Blue Noses. However, the first mention of a death did not occur until 5 years later. In the spring of 1862, another shaft measuring 107 feet in depth was dug. This one was deeper than the first, because this new shaft was used to pump water out of the older shaft to a depth of 103 feet. It was built in a parallel fashion to the older shaft and was connected to it. The equipment that had been utilized by the Onslow and Turo firms was recovered, despite the fact that the pumps were unable to keep up with the rising floodwater levels. The Oak Island Association also undertook some work at Smith's Cove by drilling a new shaft in an effort to cut off and seal the claimed flood tunnels. This work was done in an attempt to find buried treasure. Because of the tide, which eventually smashed through the obstacles that were put in place, all of these endeavors ended up being unsuccessful in the end. In 1864, there was one last attempt made to intersect the money pit, which ultimately resulted in the purported flood tunnels being breached once more. At this point, the walls of the initial shaft were being eroded by salt water, and several of the workers refused to enter it. After mining engineers conducted an inspection of the original shaft and determined that it was hazardous, the firm decided to give up its efforts since it had run out of money. There are some scientists who have offered their explanations, and some of them, those formed by nature. There is a great deal of conjecture on how the hole got there and what it could be hiding within it. According to Joe Nickel, there is no treasure. The pit is a natural phenomenon, most likely a sinkhole connected to limestone passageways or caves. Nickel believes that the pit was formed by erosion. At the very least, suggestions that the pit is the result of a natural phenomena, debris that has accumulated in a sinkhole or geological fault, date back to 1911. Existing on the mainland in close proximity to the island are a number of sinkholes and caves, which are the booby traps that are spoken of. It has been hypothesized that the texture of the naturally deposited debris in sinkholes is partially to blame for the resemblance to man-made pits. This filling would be softer than the surrounding ground and give the impression that it had been dug up before. The platforms of rotten logs had been linked to trees that had been destroyed by blowdowns, derechas, or wildfires, which fall or wash into the hollow on a recurring basis. When workers were excavating a well on the shore of Mahone Bay in 1949, they came upon another hole in the vicinity that resembled the early description of the money pit. This pit was found in the same general location, at a spot where the ground was particularly pliable. A layer of fieldstone was discovered around 2 feet beneath. Then, at sporadic intervals, logs of spruce and oak were found, and a portion of the wood had a burnt appearance. The first thought that came to everyone's mind was that another potential money trap had been discovered. Finds of great value. The oldest version said that the pit contained a pirate treasure that had been buried by Captain Kidd. According to the legend, Captain Kidd and Henry Avery looted treasure together, and Oak Island served as their communal bank. Edward Teach, often known as Blackbeard, is the subject of a second hypothesis about pirates. He is supposed to have said that he buried his treasure where none but Satan and myself can find it. So folks, that's all for today. Hope you liked the video, and also don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more updates about historical things.